Come on. We will win. Because we will hit all game. We are motivated. We are dedicated. Come on now. Come on now. We will win. Because we are the best on the field. And we hit the field like all day light, all night light, on the blue light, offense light, defense light, his squad light, house call light, and it sound light, and it sound light, and it sound light.
Yeah.
It's official. It's official. It's official.
Combine season is upon us.
I'ma do this here forever.
EQ.
Forever.
Triangle.
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever. I'ma do this here forever.
Let's go.
All you haters better be coming. This the day you've been waiting on your road.
You know, and if you look at all their other sports, it's not really the greatest as well. BYU used to be solid at basketball, or at least, actually, they used to be pretty good. They're somewhat solid. I haven't paid attention this season, but they don't have Jimmer Fredette no more to rely on three-pointers, so they're not the best. Football, obviously, the history on that program, and Ty Detmer being back as the offensive coordinator, seeing what they could do. Maybe it's enough for football to say, look, you know, we can bring them in. We touch into the West Coast market and money-wise, and maybe they help us out a little bit. Maybe, you know, maybe we can just deal with the scheduling, and the rest of the sports will start getting better due to recruiting coming to the Big 12. That could be something. But it's looking more and more like the Big 12 doesn't want to go West Coast. They don't want to go West Coast. They want to stay towards Central and really venture off to the East. I mean, because you look at the last expansion that happened before TCU got an invite, the Big 12 was looking at West Virginia, who did get the invite and accepted, and Louisville. Now, things happen with Louisville, but they're really starting to venture more East Coast, whether it's because of money or what. They're wanting to go East Coast. Now, Big 12 used to be Central and West Coast. Colorado, teams like that, Nebraska, they were in that area. They know that market, but they're slowly just wanting to go east, which I would have to assume that it's because of money, that they believe there's more money on the East Coast. I don't understand. West Coast to me is a lot better, but that's just how it is. So I don't see BYU really being that team to get the invite and moving on to the next team, Memphis. Now, the Tigers would have been a lock, really. They really would have into the Big 12 if Justin Fuente had stayed. What he was making of that program, rising it from an 11-1 program to a bowl team, and you know, recruiting a quarterback that's now become most likely a first-round draft pick, if not second round. A rising football program. The Tennessee market, Memphis, Tennessee, is huge. Yeah. And again, Big 12 wanting to move east, that would be perfect. You touch in, maybe you tap through the SEC just like the SEC got to A&M. Maybe say, hey, we're going to take one of the Tennessee teams, a rising program. Basketball is pretty solid. I don't know too much about the baseball. I'm talking about men's and women's basketball. I don't know about their baseball team. But the football, again, a rising program that said this could bring us a good amount of money because we've seen what Memphis did this season. So because of that, and also a great market, like I said, you know, it looked great. But then when Justin Fuente left, it's like, okay, now there's a huge question mark on Memphis when you look at it. Academics are there, but you're starting to look at it and you're like, if this team goes back to a 3-7 team, 3-9 type of team, we can't take them. You know, we can't be positive this team isn't going to be above 500 because without him, we saw what they were like. With him, we saw what they were like. Now they're back without him. Are they going to go back to that same team? Is it going to take a year or two and then they go back? You know, what is it going to be like? So a huge question mark looms over Memphis. And because of that, I don't believe they are going to get the invite as well. And finally, the last team that I do not believe gets the invite is because of it's not too much of a stupid reason, but it's Houston, the Houston Cougars. Now, first question, before you say, oh, no, they're going to get the invite, look at what they've done, blah, blah, blah. Hold on. Is Todd Herman really going to be at the U of H in 2 years from now? Even probably next year. The year after that. I get it. He just signed an extension. I got that. Trust me. I paid attention. I talked about it on my show. But what happens if University of Texas, Ohio State, where he just came from, UCLA, LSU, Alabama, or another SEC school, another big-time school, what if they have a head coaching position? I get it. He's from the state of Texas. He loves Texas. He wants to build this Houston program to what it used to be back when, of course, the name slips me, back when they were just air raiding everybody. They just got everybody through and went through everybody. He wants to lead this Houston program to one of the top teams in the state of Texas and in the nation. I get that. But what happens when one of those jobs come calling here in a couple years? Now, there's no guarantee that any of those jobs will pop up, but we've heard a lot. You know, Urban Meyer doesn't really stay at schools for a long time. UCLA, you know, Mora was thinking about jumping back to the NFL. Does he jump next year? LSU, they almost fired Les Miles. I get they pulled in a great recruiting class, but they almost fired him after an 8-5 season or something. They might fire him again. They might think about firing him again. Alabama's Nick Saban, does he retire after next season? And if they do, did they call Todd Herman? Can he afford to turn that job down? Ohio State, if he goes back, could he go back there to being the head coach? Texas, would he want to jump to the big school in Texas already? Who knows? So there's a lot of uncertainty. In basketball, they're pretty good. Baseball, they're really good. So they have the other sports, and if they believe Todd Herman will be there for the next several years, and at least 3 to 5 years, maybe become something. But I believe the only way Houston would get into the Big 12 is if the Big 12 expands to 14 teams. There's no way if they expand just for 2 more teams that they allow Houston in. They can't have. You already have 4 teams in the state of Texas. TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, Texas. You cannot have another team in the state of Texas and then add another team just wherever. It's not going to work. You have to have another 3 teams to add some diversity because they don't want to add more Texas teams. It's done. It's done with Texas. They're done with the state of Texas. Unless somehow A&M wanted back in, maybe they make an exception. But which I don't agree with, but that's just how it is. And they can't have 5 out of the 12 teams being from the state of Texas. The conference will die. It will sink. They can't happen. I get it, Houston, huge market, one of the biggest out of all of these teams that we're talking about. Out of all these schools, Houston has the biggest market. But the conference could not survive with that many Texas teams. So, who are the favorites? Well, we're left with that. And, just make sure I didn't get any news. That leaves UConn, Louisville, and Cincinnati are the closest things to locks into the Big 12. UConn, they have the most interesting case out of all of these. They're great at basketball. Solid at men's, but, they could get back to being great. Women's, the best in college basketball. They are just ridiculous in how great they are. Obviously, you jump up there, you get the New York market, the Northeast market, and that generates a ton of money. Big 12, all about money, especially if you're going to expand to 12 teams and you want a big jump in money and revenue. Boom, there's your lucky ticket. There's your golden ticket right there. The fall for them is really just the distance. I mean, it's going to be terrible for 9 other teams to try to go out there. West Virginia will have the easiest trip. You got to worry about Tech. You got to worry about any of the Texas teams. Kansas State, Iowa State, maybe. those are long flights all the way out to UConn. It's just gonna be bad. And remember, it's not just football. It's not just they just go once a year. There's basketball. There's swimming. There's lacrosse. I don't know. I don't know if the Big 12 has lacrosse. Baseball, basketball, of course. You have track and field. You have all these other sports. You can't just forget about that. You have all these other small sports, or at least small, that might be small in your mind, that have to travel there multiple times a year. And that costs money, and it's terrible distance. Now, of course, UConn did beat Houston, which could be a sign of things, and went to a bowl game. Looks like their program football might be stepping back up. Baseball, I don't know if they even play baseball in Connecticut, but is it enough for them to come into the Big 12? I think they have a really good shot at getting the invite. These are the last 3 teams are the favorites in getting an invite because of the fact that they bring in one of the most amount of money, and them wanting to go East Coast, UConn could be the thing, and it could open up other things towards expansion. Last 2 teams are Cincinnati and Louisville. Now, Cincinnati, they're all but a lock into the Big 12 expansion. They will get the invite if the Big 12 decides to expand, and they will accept it and become part of the Big 12. There's no denying that. You cannot say that they won't. If you do, please let me know in the comment section why you believe Cincinnati will not. Not because you're a fan of the other teams that I said no to. Why do you believe Cincinnati wouldn't? I would love to hear it. They're a solid market in Ohio. They are probably the most balanced of all teams in terms of basketball, baseball, football being the major sports. They're the most balanced and have the most recent history. The Bearcats have been to 9 straight bowl games. Granted that the last 3 they've been blown out in, but they've been to 9 straight bowl games in football. That shows success. They're renovating their football stadium. They're getting a little bit better, and it immediately brings in a rivalry West Virginia has not had since joining the conference. You give the Cincinnati-West Virginia rivalry, that can bring in some money as well for all terms of sports. And West Virginia, they need a buddy. They need a partner out on the East Coast. Cincinnati gives that to them. That's why I think Cincinnati is basically a lock-in, and their basketball helps bring up Big 12 as already the greatest or the best conference in basketball right now. You bring Cincinnati in, who, if they could get back to who they were a few years ago, boom, you're jumping up as well. The last team is Louisville. Now, you could also, I have no idea where the camera cut off. I'm sorry about that. I don't understand why the camera cuts off. I just get to. Back what I was saying to Louisville. Now you can almost lock Louisville in, but they were passed on the last expansion around, and I don't want to get into the politics of it again, mainly because I don't remember, but also they were passed on for an apparent reason. They just didn't get the invite. The Cardinals, they won the NCAA tournament in basketball just a few years back. The football team has struggled this year, but we've seen with the success they had with Charlie Strong, having Teddy Bridgewater, and it brings in not the greatest of market in Kentucky, but you also dab into the SEC, into the East Coast, and having Louisville, West Virginia, and then Cincinnati all on the East Coast, you bring in a good amount of money, and you expand your conference in a greater demographic. I guess I could say. Let's see what else I was gonna say. But also, can they rebound from losing a top coach like they did with Charlie Strong? They have shown. I'm completely off here. They have shown that they can rebound from losing a top coach, unlike their competitors. Can Houston, still be the same team without Todd Herman if he were to leave? Can Memphis be the same team without Justin Fuente? I get some of these things have just happened recently or haven't happened, but they have shown that, look, even without Charlie Strong, we've stepped in, we've gone to a bowl game, and we've done pretty well. And we're still recruiting. Baseball, they're pretty solid as well. So you bring in a good amount of those teams. So that's 3 teams that could, they have the best chance of being a lock to getting in. But let's have a little bit more fun, and we'll wrap this up pretty quickly here. What if the Big 12, obviously one of the big reasons of expansion, they got to fold or push the Longhorn Network down. They got to just say, hey, you got Texas, you got to drop it, and we just make it into a Big 12 network, and boom. Longhorns, they don't want to do that because it's their money. They're generating the most profit out of it. And if they fold and the Big 12 network comes up, then they share money with people they wouldn't have. That's what it comes down to. But let's have a little bit more fun. Let's say the Big 12 forces Longhorn Network to drop, and the Big 12 becomes too lucrative of a deal to join for other Power 5 teams that say, F it, let's just go. We'll deal with the payout. We'll deal with what we have to, and let's go. I mean, the Big 12 is about to be something, and another conference on the East Coast is really less of dominant. So, and if you know who I'm talking about, that's the ACC. So let's say, for example, the Florida State, Miami, and Clemson all want to leave the ACC for the Big 12 conference. And before you think I'm crazy, then all right, that's it. Done with the video, done with the podcast. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's already gone off the deep end. Wait a minute now. Now, after the Big 12 lost Nebraska and Colorado, the Miami and Florida State both wanted to leave the ACC for the Big 12 when that happened. Because they were upset with the ACC. They were upset with the conference and some of the people over some certain situations and said, you know what? We want to leave. We are done screwing with you guys. Big 12 would love to have us. We would love to be there. We're going to go there. To this day, Florida State is still upset with the ACC. And so now the Big 12 wants to expand. They'll be able to offer more money per year due to the Big 12 network. It'd be a perfect opportunity. That could be something. A team I did forget now, I was talking about Florida, Miami. UCF and USF. I get the market for Orlando and the alumni, but they've shown that they go back to being the same team without a star player on their team. They go back to sucking again. So UCF, no, they aren't. I don't think they would get an an invite either. So I'm sure you already left a comment about it, but in case you didn't, just letting you know. Now, finally, what if the Big 12 votes no expansion, and the Big 12 dies in the 2025-2026 season when all the contracts run out and every school saying, screw this conference, we're going elsewhere, or whatever. This is a possibility. This could happen because 2025 is when all the deals run out and they're done, and they're not going to want to, none of these teams are going to want to, if they don't expand by then, they're not going to want to try to expand then or stay with the conference. And I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're talking about 2025 here. But, oh well, let's do it. Let's have some fun. Kansas State, Iowa State, and Oklahoma, I believe they would all join the Big Ten Conference. And I know what you're saying. Well, that would make them 18 teams in the Big Ten. How can they survive in football? If they went nine, if they went two divisions, obviously, and 9 teams per, that means they only have, one or two conference games? Ouch. No, I don't know how it would work out, but they could also drop some other small schools because they would get a team like Oklahoma. Kansas is going to, both of the Kansas schools are going to look out for each other. Iowa's already there in the Big Ten. They're going to look out for their little brother, Iowa State, and bring them on in because they're in a terrible area for a conference because everybody's either West Coast, North, and then East Coast, Southeast. That's really it. There's nothing in the middle area other than the Big 12, but we're saying that's gone, unless these teams want to make a smaller conference, which I highly doubt. They'll head on over. West Virginia would either go to the ACC if they're still alive or the SEC, which would be something special. Oklahoma State and Texas Tech go to the Pac-12. Baylor and Texas could also go to the Pac-12 if they wanted to, but I also put a little option that Baylor could go to the ACC if they didn't want to join the Pac-12. And Texas could go independent if they didn't want to go to the Pac-12, if they want to just see what their options are from there. And then this is where all the haters are going to go because of a TCU fan. And I'm stepping back. I'm not being biased, but from a few people, TCU wants to join the SEC if the Big 12 dies. And I know what you're saying. Oh, they can't play with them. Should we go back to the Peach Bowl? Should we? Nah, y'all don't want to see that. Y'all don't want to see that. Should we go back to a few other games? Should we fast forward to TCU when they play Arkansas? Nah, y'all don't want to. Y'all don't want to. Y'all too scared. Should we go in basketball? Even men's basketball where we suck. We're 3-0 against the SEC. Baseball, y'all want to talk about how we beat Ole Miss? Y'all want to see how we beat A&M? Nah, y'all don't want to. Y'all are too crazy. Now, the SEC wants to pick up another Texas team if possible. Now, A&M, they get the College Station, somewhat Houston market, not really, just a little dap into it. And what TCU holds over Baylor, and obviously I don't think Texas would go to the SEC just because I think they'd honestly be too scared of the competition week in and week out. I don't think Texas is going to want to deal with that. I think they'd rather take their chances going either independent or to the Pac-12 and, not lesser competition, but, they don't want to deal with all that stuff. But TCU, they're in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. They're actually in it. Waco and Baylor, they are not. They are not in the DFW area. They do not bring in that type of money, nor the resources. And that's not me being, hating on Baylor. I never would, but I'm just letting you know that there is a difference. And for the SEC to jump into that and take that market as well would be huge. TCU would want to join the SEC because of money and finally saying, hey, there's no more excuses. None of y'all could say we can't play with the big dogs because we've beaten them, and we'll go into a conference and still win. Houston, I don't think would get an invite either unless Todd Herman really did stay. Then you could see him, that Tech wouldn't, and neither would Texas. And obviously, we're talking about Texas and the Big 12 staying, end up crumbling. That's because of the Longhorn. It's also because the Longhorn Network stays. SEC isn't going to let the Longhorn Network in. Pac-12 might not either. So Texas' best option is probably going to go independent. And TCU will continue, as long as they continue to succeed in baseball, being the top 15 team nationally every single year, or top 5, really. Football, same thing, top 5. And women's basketball being good as it is. If men's basketball can actually play basketball, then TCU is the best option out of all those to go to SEC and go from there. That is it for the college football.